Manhattan's skyline gleamed gold in the early morning sun, but inside the luxurious penthouse of 58-year-old real estate magnate Calvin Mercer, the air was thick with tension. Calvin, one of the most feared and revered tycoons in New York, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, swirling a glass of single-malt whiskey at 9 a.m. He wasn't a man of conventions. He was a man of control. His daughter, Serena Mercer, 24, stormed into the room in stilettos and silk, her expression a perfect storm of disbelief and fury. Her father's butler, Edgar, discreetly exited the room, knowing this wasn't a conversation for outside ears. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice trembling. "You want me to marry the gardener?" Calvin turned slowly. His silver hair was neatly slicked back, his tailored suit pressed to perfection. His eyes, cold, steel gray, held no emotion. "Serena," he said, "I've built an empire. You've done nothing but spend and party. You flunked out of Stanford. You totaled 2 Maseratis. If you want your inheritance, you'll prove you can obey, commit, and understand value. You'll marry Jesse Vale by the end of the month." Jesse Vale, the son of an immigrant, quiet, rough-handed, barely spoke unless spoken to. He'd worked the Mercer estate gardens since he was 19. Calvin had once caught him reading a book of philosophy under a magnolia tree and called it useless indulgence. Now, that same man was being thrust into the spotlight of the Mercer dynasty. "This is some kind of sick test, isn't it?" Serena scoffed, pacing. "Why him?" Calvin took a long sip of his whiskey. "Because Jesse has something you don't. Discipline, integrity, roots." Serena's mind raced. This wasn't just a power move, it was humiliation. Her father had always controlled every inch of her life, but this was a new level. It was psychological warfare. She slammed the door on her way out, her heels echoing like gunshots through the marble hallway. She didn't notice Jesse watching from the courtyard, his brow furrowed, dirt-stained hands clutching pruning shears. Later that day, Calvin made the announcement public at a Mercer Foundation gala. Serena's forced engagement to Jesse made headlines by dawn. "Heiress marries help. Mercer madness or modern fairy tale?" The New York Post read. The board of Mercer Enterprises cheered Calvin's eccentric brilliance, claiming it would humanize the brand. But Serena? She wasn't planning a wedding. She was planning a war. The next morning, Serena sat in the vast marble bathtub of her private suite, the windows fogged, her face stone cold. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, messages from fashion bloggers, influencers, tabloids. Everyone wanted to comment on her love story. Her socialite friends sent laughing emojis. One even asked if she was starting a charity for underprivileged husbands. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she stared at the engagement ring her father had placed on her dresser, an emerald-cut diamond surrounded by thorns. Custom-made, grotesque, and symbolic. Just like Calvin. Across the estate, Jesse Vale was summoned to the East Terrace. Calvin greeted him like a general addressing a soldier. "You'll marry her, and you'll stay in line. You'll get a new wardrobe, a backstory, PR coaching. Do your part, and I'll set you up with a landscaping business when this is done," Calvin said. Jesse narrowed his eyes. "And if I don't?" Calvin stepped closer. "Then I'll make sure no client in New York hires a Vale again. And I'll personally have your mother's nursing home payments terminated." Jesse's jaw tightened. His mother, frail and battling Alzheimer's, depended on that care. He nodded once. Silent consent. The engagement was fast-tracked. Calvin called in every favor. Paparazzi staged candid shots of the couple walking through Central Park, laughing on a yacht, shopping in Soho. Every smile Serena gave Jesse was rehearsed. Every kiss, fake. Jesse barely spoke, but when he did, his voice was calm, restrained. Behind the scenes, Serena wasn't grieving. She was plotting. Late one night, she crept into the Mercer archives, the underground vault where Calvin kept old business contracts, lawsuits, personal documents. With Edgar's reluctant help, she unlocked file after file. What she found wasn't just corruption, it was criminal. Embezzlement, bribes, falsified permits, illegal demolitions. Her father's empire wasn't built on brilliance. It was built on bodies. Serena smirked. 2 days later, she told Jesse, "If we're going to be husband and wife, we need to act like a team. I have a plan. It involves you helping me destroy the man who's controlling both our lives." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "Destroy Calvin Mercer?" She leaned closer, whispering with venom. No, I'm going to break him, and you're going to help me paralyze his legacy. For the first time, Jesse smiled. The wedding was a spectacle. Held in a glass-domed botanical garden outside Manhattan, it was a carefully curated illusion of love. Serena wore a Vera Wang gown, embroidered with pearls and secrets. Jesse wore a custom black tux, tailored to erase any trace of soil or sweat. The guest list was a who's who of New York's elite: hedge fund giants, political sharks, Hollywood moguls. Calvin Mercer stood at the altar like a king watching his kingdom expand. But behind his composed smile, paranoia brewed. He noticed the way Serena's eyes didn't wander toward her groom, but flickered toward the Mercer board members seated in the third row, his enemies disguised as allies. Serena knew this marriage wasn't just a performance. It was her knife in the dark. As vows were exchanged, the press swooned over the unlikely couple defying status and stereotypes. Jesse kept his hand steady as he slid the ring onto her finger. But when Serena said, "I do," her eyes glinted with something dangerous. She wasn't vowing love. She was declaring war. After the reception, as fireworks lit the sky above the Hudson, Serena pulled Jesse into her suite and locked the door. "We have exactly 6 weeks before my father announces me as his successor at the Mercer Foundation Gala," she said. "We'll take him down before then." Jesse crossed his arms. "You want me to hack into his files, forge documents, or play the doting husband while you burn the empire down from within?" Serena smirked. "All of it." Phase 1 began immediately. Serena hosted charity events under the Mercer name, charming Calvin's most loyal board members. She poured them wine, listened to their secrets, and slowly turned them into co-conspirators, without them knowing. Jesse, meanwhile, gained quiet access to Mercer's real estate servers. His brother, a former cybersecurity analyst with a grudge against Calvin, helped decrypt records of overseas shell companies. They discovered a hidden account in the Cayman Islands, used to pay off judges who approved illegal evictions and property seizures. One of those judges had recently died under suspicious circumstances. Jesse printed everything. Serena made copies. They created a digital trail designed to look like Calvin was preparing to betray his own investors. Back at the estate, Calvin started noticing things. Missing keys, unscheduled access to vaults, strange calls from board members acting too friendly. One night, as Calvin walked into his study, he found a red envelope on his desk. Inside was a photo, him at a construction site in Queens, 20 years ago. The site had collapsed a week later, killing a family of 4. The case had vanished. Serena's handwriting bled across the photo. "Your past is soil, and we are the gardeners." Calvin dropped the photo, and for the first time in decades, he felt fear. It was nearly midnight when Serena and Jesse met in the greenhouse. The place smelled of damp earth and blooming secrets. Candles flickered on a stone table between them, their flames trembling as if they, too, knew they were in the presence of something dangerous. "I planted these roses when I was 17, Serena said, gesturing to the black blossoms behind her. "My father had them clipped the day after. Said they were too dark, too unnatural. I kept the seeds." Jesse touched one of the petals. "They're beautiful. And poisonous." "Exactly." She sat across from him, her white silk robe brushing the floor like mist. "It's time for phase 2. Jesse handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on there. The offshore accounts, the bribes, the sealed settlements. We even have proof he laundered money through Mercer-funded shelters. He used homeless shelters as fronts." Serena's eyes didn't blink. "We'll leak it, but not all at once." She pulled out a calendar and laid it flat. "We release a breadcrumb every Thursday, starting this week. First, we bait the media, then the IRS, then the feds. By the time the Mercer Foundation Gala rolls around, my father will be too busy defending himself to crown a successor. And when he does," Jesse added, "he'll find the crown covered in thorns." They clinked glasses, not in celebration, but in silent recognition of the chaos they were about to unleash. The next morning, the first leak dropped. An anonymous whistleblower tipped off a journalist from The Atlantic about a $10 million property deal Calvin had struck under a false identity. The article went viral. Stocks dipped. Calvin's legal team scrambled. Serena played her part flawlessly, publicly defending her father on live TV, shedding tears she didn't feel, blaming coordinated corporate sabotage. Calvin watched the interview from his office, a glass of scotch trembling in his hand. "She's grown," he muttered. But suspicion gnawed at him. That photo from Queens still haunted him. And the way Jesse moved in the estate, calm, precise, too observant, set off alarms in his mind. Calvin had built empires by trusting his gut, and right now, his gut screamed betrayal. He ordered Edgar to investigate quietly. Check the servers, the surveillance, her phone, his contacts. "I want everything." But Edgar hesitated. "She's your daughter, sir. And I'm her father," Calvin snapped. "Which means I made her. And I can unmake her." Meanwhile, Serena made a bold move. She visited Amelia Riker, a former Mercer executive forced out after exposing workplace discrimination. Serena brought flowers, wine, and an apology. "I know my father destroyed you," she said, pouring a glass of Cabernet. "But if you help me, we can make sure he never destroys anyone else." Amelia studied her with suspicion. Then, slowly, she nodded. By the end of the night, Amelia had handed Serena a file that contained the final puzzle piece. A recorded call of Calvin threatening a city councilman, the same man who later resigned and fled the country. Serena slipped the file into her vault. She now held enough ammunition to obliterate Calvin's empire. But what she didn't know was that Calvin had just hacked her laptop, and he had heard every word. Calvin stared at the playback. His daughter's voice echoed through his private surveillance room. Sharp, cunning, ruthless. "I don't want to ruin him," Serena had said on the recording. "I want to erase him." He sat alone, the walls lined with decades of secrets, betrayal, and betrayal averted. This wasn't business anymore. It was blood. It was war. And Calvin Mercer had never lost a war. He summoned his legal team. No explanations. Just orders. Shut down every account she can access. Freeze the trust. Lock the foundation vaults. Pull Jesse's immigration file. "I want dirt. I want leverage. And most of all, I want silence." By morning, Serena's cards were declined. Her foundation login failed. Her staff received layoff notices. Her calendar cleared itself like it had been wiped clean by a ghost. She knew. He knew. But Serena didn't flinch. She walked into Calvin's private study, something no one had dared do uninvited in 20 years. She stood across from his desk like a storm in heels. "You listen to me," she said, voice calm. "I created you," Calvin replied. "Of course I did." She smirked. "Then you know how dangerous I am." Calvin leaned forward, his silver cufflinks catching the morning light. "I also know your weakness. You want to be better than me. You want the world to cheer when you take me down." "Is that so bad?" "No," he said, standing. "But it makes you predictable." Serena stepped closer. "You're wrong about one thing." Calvin raised an eyebrow. "I don't need the world to cheer," she whispered. "I just need you to watch." Then she left. Just like that. That night, Jesse received a letter at the estate gate. No postage. No fingerprints. Just a single sentence written in ink that bled through the envelope. "She dies, or you both do." Inside was a photo, Jesse's mother, sitting in her care facility, feeding pigeons. Harmless. But it wasn't the image that frightened him. It was the message. Calvin had found her. Jesse rushed to Serena, letter in hand, panic in his voice. But she was unfazed. "He won't hurt her," she said, lacing up her boots. "He doesn't kill with bullets. He kills with silence. Disgrace. Isolation. Bankruptcy." Jesse shook his head. "We're out of time. You wanted to break him slowly. Now we hit him fast. All of it. We go nuclear." Serena paused. Then she nodded. The next day, every journalist on the East Coast received an untraceable email. Inside, every file, every photo, every recording, including the one from the councilman Calvin had threatened. The internet ignited. #Mercer Exposed trended within minutes. Congress announced an investigation. Mercer Enterprises stock plummeted. Protesters gathered outside Mercer Tower, chanting blood money and justice for the evicted. Calvin watched it unfold on 6 screens. He didn't blink. Instead, he dialed a number he hadn't used in 15 years. "Activate Black Protocol," he said coldly. "Erase Serena Mercer. I want her name buried. I want her face scrubbed from every archive. She doesn't exist anymore." He hung up. Then he stood, walked to the window, and whispered, "If she wants war, I'll give her apocalypse." 3 days after the Mercer leaks exploded across every news outlet, Serena Mercer disappeared. Not just from the press, from everything. Her bank accounts were erased. Her apartment emptied. Her social media accounts deleted. Even her birth records were mysteriously removed from the Manhattan Municipal Database. It was as if Serena Mercer had never existed. The media speculated she fled the country. Others whispered about suicide. But Jesse Vale knew the truth. Calvin had triggered Black Protocol, a private security operation created during the post-9/11 era for asset removal and identity nullification. It was illegal, expensive, and nearly unstoppable. And it was meant for foreign enemies. Now it was being used against Calvin's own daughter. Jesse, now a wanted accomplice, escaped through the tunnels beneath the Mercer estate. He reached out to Amelia Riker, the ex-executive Serena had brought into the fold. She smuggled him into a safe house, an old brownstone in Brooklyn owned by a forgotten cousin with a fake passport and a grudge. Inside, Jesse found Serena waiting. But she was no longer Serena Mercer. Her hair was dyed black. Her skin, tanned to hide her usual porcelain tone. Her posture, changed, shoulders back, eyes sharper, colder. "They think I'm dead," she said flatly. "Good. That gives us the advantage." Jesse stared. "You let him erase you?" She nodded. "Now I'm a ghost. And ghosts don't play by the rules." Across town, Calvin's legal team was on life support. The SEC was closing in. 3 board members had resigned. The IRS had launched a full audit into the Mercer Foundation. Every day, a new headline screamed another sin. Mercer empire built on blood and bribes. Former judge breaks silence. Evicted family speaks out. But Calvin remained unnaturally calm. He had started moving his money through crypto accounts and untraceable offshore funds. He hired a mercenary cyber team to hunt down the source of the leaks. He tightened his circle, firing anyone who so much as hesitated to obey. And one night, while reviewing a shipment ledger from a shipping port in Jersey, he found it. A name. V. Riker. It was Amelia's alias, used to ship encrypted drives to an anonymous journalist in D.C. He smiled. He wasn't going to wait for the law. He was going to finish this his way. Meanwhile, in the Brooklyn brownstone, Serena and Jesse launched Phase 3, Public Redemption. Serena reappeared, not as herself, but as Eve Dalton, an anonymous whistleblower claiming to have worked deep within the Mercer Foundation. She started a video series from an encrypted channel, revealing what it was like to be inside the machine. She disguised her voice, wore a mask, and slowly grew a cult following. People listened. Protesters turned to action. 3 Mercer subsidiaries were shut down. One senator who took campaign money from Mercer publicly denounced him. The world was turning. But Serena's revenge wasn't done. Not until her father was utterly ruined. "I want him to beg," she told Jesse one night. "Not for forgiveness. For relevance." "And what then?" She looked out the window. "I won't kill him. That's too easy." She turned, her eyes dark with resolution. "I want to leave him alive, with nothing." Calvin Mercer stood before the mirror in his private penthouse, watching his empire crumble in real time. The headlines rolled in like thunder. Mercer Foundation suspended amidst federal investigation. Anonymous whistleblower reveals hidden slave labor in overseas projects. Calls for Calvin Mercer's arrest grow after explosive video series. He adjusted his cufflinks, still dressed in a $1,000 suit. Still looking like the king he once was. But his face had aged 5 years and 2 weeks. His hands trembled slightly, something he refused to acknowledge. His calls now went unanswered by former allies. Banks hesitated. Investors fled. And most devastating of all, the Mercer family name, once synonymous with power, had become a punchline. He smashed the glass of bourbon against the wall. "Find her," he roared to his security chief, Nolan Price. "I don't care how many names she hides under. Serena, Eve, whoever she thinks she is. I want her face on a slab." But Nolan hesitated. "Sir, she's become a symbol. If we go after her directly now, it'll look like retaliation. The FBI is watching. The media too. We make one wrong move, and it's over." Calvin's eyes turned to steel. "It is already over. Unless we finish it first." Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Serena watched her own rise from the ashes. As Eve Dalton, she had exposed enough corruption to start a national conversation on corporate immunity and dynastic power. She was being called the ghost of justice. But that fame brought danger. One evening, she returned to the brownstone to find the front door ajar. Jesse met her at the back alley with a knife in one hand and a burner phone in the other. "They found us," he said. "We have to move. Now." Serena didn't ask how. She just ran. They moved to an abandoned church in Harlem, guarded by an ex-hacker named Tori, who owed Jesse her freedom. Inside, the cold stone walls echoed with the sound of planning. Jesse unrolled the blueprints of Mercer Tower. "This is it," he said. "The gala is still happening. Calvin thinks he can use it to win public favor back, maybe announce some fake charity, do damage control. But we'll be there. Not to stop it, to end it." Serena stared at the blueprint. "That's where I was supposed to be crowned heir," she said quietly. "No," Jesse corrected. "That's where you'll bury him." Days later, Calvin stood in the elevator of Mercer Tower, rehearsing his speech for the gala. The event hall above buzzed with anxious guests, a desperate mixture of curiosity, loyalty, and fear. The once-invincible name of Mercer had become radioactive, but everyone wanted to witness either redemption or destruction. As the elevator doors opened, Calvin stepped into the bright lights of the ballroom. Flashbulbs popped. Music played. Waiters served cocktails. The cameras turned to him. He smiled. But across the room, masked as a server, Serena slid through the crowd unnoticed, a flash drive hidden in her tray. She passed Jesse at the bar. He nodded once. Tonight, they wouldn't just expose Calvin. They'd do something far more brutal. Make him confess. The Mercer Foundation gala was unfolding like a poorly rehearsed play. Fake smiles. Nervous laughter. Old money faces desperate to believe that Calvin Mercer still had control. But behind the curtains, the architecture of that illusion was crumbling. In a side corridor, Jesse finished wiring the AV booth. He'd rerouted the projector's feed to his own laptop, ready to override it at the perfect moment. Every major news network was streaming the gala live. Across the ballroom, Serena, masked in a sleek black dress and wig, moved like a ghost among the servers, tray in hand, her eyes locked on her father at the podium. Calvin cleared his throat. "My friends," he began, voice steady, confident. "Thank you for standing with the Mercer Foundation. Despite the unfounded attacks on my name, we are here tonight to announce our newest initiative, the Phoenix Grant, a $1 billion pledge to rebuild underserved communities." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. But no one noticed Serena step into the control booth with Jesse and press enter. Suddenly, the projection screen behind Calvin flickered. Then came his voice, from a hidden recording. "I don't care if those kids starved. It was a tax shelter. That's what matters." The room froze. Whispers swelled into gasps as the audio continued, clip after damning clip. Calvin threatening city officials, mocking eviction victims, laughing about falsified safety inspections that led to deaths. He turned, stunned, staring at the screen behind him as his own crimes played out like a nightmare reel. Security rushed to the stage. The crowd erupted in chaos. Reporters streamed the footage live. And then, Serena stepped onto the stage. She removed her wig. The gasps became silence. "Hello, Father," she said into the microphone, her voice calm and icy. "It's only fitting that your empire dies the way it was built, under spotlights, wrapped in lies." Calvin lunged forward, trying to grab the mic, but Jesse tackled him to the ground before he got close. Serena continued, "This man destroyed families. He buried justice beneath concrete and cash. And now he's going to tell the world the truth." She held up a legal document. "A full confession," she said. "Signed by you, 3 days ago, while you were sedated in your own penthouse. I forged your signature, of course, but the evidence proves every word true." Gasps returned. Calvin, pinned to the ground, screamed, "She's insane. None of this is legal." Serena crouched beside him, whispering softly, so only he could hear, "Neither was your life." Then she stood. "To the people of New York," she said into the mic, "this is not justice. This is balance. And if there's one thing my father taught me," she paused, looking down at him, "it's how to bury something properly." The live stream ended with sirens. The FBI entered moments later. Calvin was arrested, still shouting, still denying, his eyes wide with rage and betrayal. But the damage was done, not just to his name, to his soul. For the first time in his life, Calvin Mercer wasn't feared. He was pitted. And he knew, Serena had won. 2 weeks later, the Mercer Tower stood empty. The company's insignia had been removed from its walls like a monarch's crest after a revolution. Protesters had long since gone home. The news cycle had moved on. But for Serena Mercer, the war was far from over. She sat alone in a quiet hotel room overlooking the East River, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her once flawless image was now a stranger, shorter hair, tired eyes, and a quietness that clung to her like fog. Victory hadn't felt like she expected. Jesse entered the room, carrying 2 coffees. He offered her one, but she didn't take it. "He's refusing to speak," Jesse said. "Lawyers say he's not eating. Not sleeping either. Just staring." Serena didn't flinch. "He'll talk eventually," she muttered. "He won't. He's broken, Serena. He's nothing." She turned to him sharply. "Exactly." Jesse sat beside her. "We burned it all down. The empire, the legacy, his entire identity. But what happens now?" Serena exhaled, voice low. "Now we rebuild. But not as Mercers." She nodded. "That name's dead. We bury it with him." Meanwhile, at Rikers Island, Calvin Mercer stared through the glass during a scheduled psych evaluation. His body had weakened rapidly in recent days. He refused the pills, the food, the sessions. When asked his name, he gave none. When shown photos of Serena, he blinked once and looked away. But the guards noticed something else. He couldn't move his legs. The medical team ran scans. No trauma, no injuries, no reason. But still, nothing moved from the waist down. They diagnosed it as psychogenic paralysis, a rare condition where the mind punishes the body. His brain, crushed under the weight of disgrace, had severed itself from control. The billionaire who once built cities now needed help to stand. And he would never walk again. Back in the city, Serena received an envelope at the front desk of her hotel. No return address. No signature. Inside, a single black rose. The same kind she'd once grown in the Mercer Gardens. She stared at it for a long time. "From him?" Jesse asked. "No," she said slowly. "From me." She walked to the fireplace and dropped it into the flames. Let the ashes rise. She was done sending messages. From now on, she'd only write new stories. And this time, they'd have no kings, no crowns. Just roots. A year had passed since the fall of Calvin Mercer. The Mercer name had vanished from billboards, charities, and corporate filings. The tower had been sold and rebranded. The last of the lawsuits were closed. And the man who once dictated city skylines now sat in a government hospital in upstate New York, confined to a wheelchair, speaking to no one, not even himself. He never received visitors. Except once. On a rainy spring afternoon, the doors of the facility opened, and Serena walked in. She wore no makeup, no designer coat, no mask of vengeance, just a plain dress and a folder clutched tightly in her hand. The nurses whispered when they saw her, but she ignored them. She entered the private room, where her father sat facing the window, motionless. "You remember me," she said quietly. "I know you do." No response. She walked over and sat across from him. For a long moment, she just looked. He was thinner, smaller somehow, like the building had been burned out from within. "I didn't come here to gloat," she said, "or to forgive." She placed the folder on the table. Inside were blueprints. Real ones. For a real project. Not a front. Not a scam. An actual home. Affordable housing. For people you once destroyed. She paused. "I'm going to build something that lasts. Something with no Mercer name attached. Just good. That's my legacy." Still, no response. Until his finger twitched, just barely. She noticed, but said nothing. "I'm not like you," she whispered. "But I'm not what I used to be, either. And maybe that's the price I paid." She stood. For a second, she hesitated. Then she walked out and never returned. Months later, in a small neighborhood in Queens, the first unit of the Willow Project opened its doors, a clean, green, dignified housing complex funded by anonymous donations. Locals didn't know the history behind the developer, only that the building had a plaque by the garden, where roots can grow, where names don't matter, only actions. Serena stood in the garden one morning, gloves on, planting roses. Not black ones, red. Beside her, Jesse smiled, hands in the soil. "This feels good," he said. She looked at the sky. "Not justice," she said, "but peace." And for the first time in her life, she felt it. The war was over. The garden had begun. 5 years later, the Willow Project had expanded into 5 cities, quietly transforming lives. Serena, now known only as Serena Vale, lived a quiet life in New England, raising a daughter with Jesse. She no longer gave interviews. She turned down every documentary offer. To the world, she was a myth, half ghost, half martyr. But inside her study, she kept a single locked drawer. And one evening, while her daughter played in the backyard, she opened it. Inside lay a letter, never mailed, never read aloud, from Calvin Mercer. It had arrived a year after she last saw him, written in a shaky hand, the envelope unmarked. She had never opened it. Until now. She unfolded the paper slowly. To the one thing I couldn't control. You think you won. But you didn't destroy me, Serena. You inherited me. My rage. My precision. My addiction to power. You wear it differently, but it lives in you. And someday, when you feel your fingers tighten around something good, you'll wonder if it was ever love or just control. And when that day comes, remember this. You didn't beat me. You became me. Serena read it twice. Then she struck a match, let the flame dance, and burned the letter over the kitchen sink. She didn't need his final curse. She knew who she was. But as the ashes curled into smoke, she looked outside at her daughter playing in the garden. And for a flicker of a moment, she wondered, would the curse return in the next generation? Was legacy ever truly buried? Or was it just sleeping beneath the soil?